Welcome back, everybody, to this episode of the Open Concept Podcast, where we're breaking down those unnecessary walls and barriers that stand in the way of greatness, or in this case, potentially building some walls back up. We have Travis Price here. Travis is an internationally recognized architect, author, educator, and environmental pioneer whose work has helped really redefine the relationships between architecture, culture, and the natural world. Fun fact, the only man that I know that lives in a treehouse, but we'll get into it. He's the founder of Travis Price Architects. He has spent more than 4 decades creating award-winning residential, commercial, and institutional projects that blend ecological responsibility with a deep respect for history, mythology, and the spirit of place. He's a trailblazer in sustainable design and is widely credited with coining the term passive solar, which in his early green architectural work actually down in New Mexico, and has been recognized for pioneering contributions to environmentally conscious building practices. And his portfolio, that everybody here, includes groundbreaking projects across North America, Europe, Asia, South America, you name it. We were talking offline just before about consulting on a project down in Africa, and like including the design of what was once the world's largest solar building. In Travis, every once in a while we go deep on building and architecture and design, and I love your philosophy. I love the storytelling and that you put behind your content, and really what you're bringing and have brought to the world. Like your accolades span so many decades and so many countries across the world. Super blessed to have you here, Travis. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. Yeah, happy to be here. So many tales to tell, but ecology, mythology, and technology is kind of the summation of what we've built and done so many years.
You were telling me offline before we started the podcast here, you actually took a break from architecture. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that before we jump into the architecture? At what point in your career was this?
Even before that, I was raised, I was just born in a little town in Georgia, down in the Okefenokee swamps. But my family were half Greeks and half Irish, but who isn't in America, you know? But the reality is we traveled a lot because my dad was military. So I learned a lot of things living there and then moving to Panama for 4 years, hablo español perfecto, sí. And then we moved to Heidelberg, jawohl. and I got to travel a bit, but I always loved America. And what that did is I like when I went to college, I started finding out not what college I wanted to go to, but what interesting professors were doing certain subjects. So I would switch from, Georgia Tech to MIT to New Mexico because of the people I heard that were there. And so that starts to tell you a little bit about, and I loved building tree houses and I loved making things. So that's how I started looking at the world. And that's why I dropped out of architecture for 4 years to go study the 100 great books. There's a college called St. John's in Annapolis. It's not religious at all. It's the second oldest campus in the United States only Harvard. And it only allows 500 students, and all you do is read the 100 great books and have big debates and seminars as classes. Just to flip you around, instead of a test or a professor up there, there's 20 people around a round table, and they've all read something from Euclid or Aristotle or something about the originals of all of creativity, and creativity is architecture. So, but the professor would have to ask a question that they themselves don't understand in the reading that night, and then you start to question, what is that and what is this and that. So it, in terms of the world of architecture, that just opens your mind. You're now exploring, you're not just copying, and Ptolemy, Copernicus, Kepler, all these things became like amazing to me. And then they drifted me to New Mexico, where they have a sister campus in Annapolis. And after that, I fell in love with the country. I mean, it's northern Santa Fe. You're in another realm. And then I started meeting. I suddenly found out there were a lot of really amazing architects from all over the U.S. at the University of New Mexico. They all converged to work on big ideas, and that's how I started my thesis. And I had two big thesis ideas. One was using sea containers, and this is 1970s,
Yeah.
to build houses out of containers that you could unplug. And when you drove from San Francisco to the next city, Chicago, your pieces came with it, and they went back into another building and plugged in. That was a cool idea. I learned it because in Germany, everybody moved, took their kitchen with them. It's so not what we are, but that's why the kitchens are so good, the material. And but anyway, longer story there. But it allowed me to explore the Hopi and the Navajo, and I got really out there in the extreme. And I realized that, God, there's this curved buildings, 37 of them, and I went to every one of them, these old ruins, and they all face south, and they're all curved. And we slept out there for several weeks, sometimes in the snow. But in there, it was super warm. The snow melted. Why? Because it was facing the sun, and it was passive solar in the winter. And so I coined that word, and I'm proud to say it. A good friend of mine wrote a book about it called Passive Solar. But it was all the projects I built. And my thesis was a village in Santa Fe, and a developer developed and built it while I was finishing my master's degree. And that sprung me into, ecology, nature. Ekologos in Greek means, actually means the order of the house. Eco is house. And today we think it means leaves and trees, but or dirt. But well, houses were dirt then. It was called adobe.
At that point, yeah.
Yeah. So so that's the trail, and then that really was a big thing, because all these people started writing and building, and we had teams. We would all meet together. Some real wild scientists from Los Alamos, some
Yeah.
pretty smart characters there. Created a thing called a nuclear bomb, and also I got to go over and watch protons move backwards and forwards in time at different speeds. So you have a funny mixture out there, and feathers and cowboy guns and Play-Doh and Navajo. And
Gets a little crazy in the desert.
well, yeah, and it's high desert, it's 8,000 feet. So in the winter, you die in a minute in the freezing.
You
So,
mentioned
but anyway, all said, that was the beginning of. I knew I wanted to be an architect. I love to build things, and that really triggered me into something really creative. I can tell you the next story if you want, but
yeah, I mean, you mentioned something kind of unique. I mean, everything that you mentioned was unique, but especially when you were seeking out schools, right? You mentioned MIT, and I think most people, when they're seeking out education, they're seeking out a school because that school specifically either stands for something, or it teaches something very specific, or it's well known. It has a reputation for churning out, really great education in specific fields. But that wasn't what you said you did. You were looking at it from a different perspective. You were looking at this from the people, the actual teachers that were there teaching, versus the institution themselves. You had said that you were seeking out the people that were giving the lectures, the thought leaders that were actually inside those walls, versus the school itself. What drove you to think in that way, and sort of what benefit did that have you? Is that how you would recommend people should look at education?
Oh, that's a good question. I think it took me a long time until recently, past 10 years, to realize why did I do all that? It was because we moved so much.
Mm,
I mean, when I lived in Panama, I lived in another world, watching the American tanks aiming at the Russian boats going through the canal next to my house, to going into the jungles with the amazing natives. So if you go too far, you might not come back with a head. But and all sorts of stuff. But I also met, um, the real people who conquered, the Southwest, which were Spaniards, and the Indians were totally different. And in many ways, you don't want to hear this, but the Indians were far more ruthless. I mean,
yeah.
especially you go to Inca land and see what they would do. I mean, by the hour, by the minute. But on the other hand, different views of different things, a basic landscape. But deep down underneath, I was learning culture.
Mm,
And to me today, jumping around again, the ecology, mythology, and technology, that's our triad, because mythos in Greek and also means the spirit. It means what's really inside of you, that abstraction that really is the most powerful thing, not nature, not technology. I mean, after all, steel is ecological. People don't know that. So yes, it's just a rock and some fire. So don't tell me that the adobe house is better for environmental issues. They're all Everything is made from nature. It's just a matter of and the longevity and so on. But I built with adobe. I built with steel and glass. I mean, with thinking they're the same. And
yeah.
and so you get out of that. But what I find really interesting in all those trips was culture. What was the deep history there? What was the thing in the heart of different people that really made them excited? And can I design space that evokes that? Just like the sun would heat the Hopi land or the buildings, the culture, the mysteries, the way people discuss it, not just religion. I mean, just their deep psycho. I mean, like
Mm,
Carl Jung stuff, where you get into the real brain. That really helped me a lot, because in studying Carl Jung and other modern, what we call them psychiatrists, I call them psycho philosophers, and you get that out of reading the great books too. I mean, if you do it, but all that said was, wow, that architecture should sing, you know, and
yeah.
it's more than just tech, and it's more than just nature. It's and that and in the interim, my life changed too, because I when I left New Mexico, uh, the president Nixon at the time was pushing, as where basically the conservation started with the Republican Party. Most people don't realize that they were conserving. They were big on conserving land, because they like to go hunting. They like to know it's there. And so I wrote the first book for the United States on conservation architecture, and they shipped me to New York City to work on it. And that was a big try and go out of Santa Fe, and then 2 days later be in downtown Manhattan. It's
Yeah.
a it's a different canyon, I called it. Yeah. But that's where I landed for 5 years, to help poor people in burnout buildings all over the Lower East Side and other places. The Puerto Rican mafia, Puerto Ricans were the big mafia holders down in the Southeast. The Italians were on the other side of town. You begin to meet these people; it's real.
Yeah.
Um, I thought it was in a movie or something, but the reality was the buildings were being burnt. 5-story apartment buildings burnt, one per hour per day for an entire year by Puerto Rican mafia. And what we decided was, on the street, we took people who were on the street, and we actually, two or three of us, got together and said, we're going to rebuild these buildings and teach them at the same time and live there. So we worked and worked, and we built a beautiful 5-story building with little 10 apartments. And they didn't have the money for insulation, so you'd go get grants, and they didn't have money for this. But slowly but surely, we did an insulated building for the first time in 1974. And the coolest part was, I said, well, why don't we why don't we get some solar hot water heaters up here? And not PV cells, hot water. Those
Yeah.
things, by the way, will last 1,000 years. Photovoltaic cells have a lifespan of no more than 18 years, and you have to destroy them. They can't be recycled. Most people are not aware of that either lately, but the scientists know. They invented it for the military. That's what it was for in Korean War.
Interesting.
Intel. Yeah, and so, but anyway, the bottom line is I got the solar hot water on the roof. We built it, and it was all over the news, and then we put up. Said, you know what? There's an old wind machine out there in Mississippi. Let's go fix it. And we got it, and we put it up on the roof. And there's pictures of it, 50 feet above the 5-story building, with all of Manhattan in the background. You could walk to downtown from there. And we turned the meter backwards. Whoa, that was a big hit. That became a the utility company put a lawsuit against us. I got down to New York. Some people took me down to Washington to talk to the House, Senate, and give a story about it. And it went through all that, and the Supreme Court won the case to co-generate power, to turn the meter backwards on power companies.
Wow.
So
They
after
didn't
that,
like that because they weren't making any money anymore.
no, I
Time
mean,
solution.
of course, it was a whole start. But now, of course, and then ironically, when Jimmy Carter came in, I was hired to go down by him to the Tennessee Valley Authority and meet with Dave Freeman, who was an amazing guy that had been brought in. And it's the biggest utility company in America, 7 states. So what did we end up doing in 3 years? We financed 100,000 solar hot water heaters all through the valley and installed them. Taught young black kids in Mississippi how to install, and the plumbers, and and then we built the biggest building. It's 1.3 million square feet. It's a passive solar building for the headquarters.
Wow.
And it's not the same kind of passive you see here today. It was all about light beaming, and we came in 2% less cost of construction than the high rise next to us that went up. We made a law that you couldn't have shadows on other buildings anymore.
Yeah.
And then we also did the TVA. I mean, they're nuclear guys, they're water. They all moved into this building that was 95%.
Real quick before we get back to the show, if you have heard anything on this podcast that has resonated with you, or if it's helped you in any way, appreciate more than anything in the world if you could go hit that subscribe button or leave us a review. It helps us tremendously. I want to go back to being able to continue to serve and do more and more and help out and get bigger and bigger guests on, better and better. The only way that I can do that is with your help. I'm so honored to be here. Let's get back to the show. Appreciate you. Have a wonderful day.
Free of energy use, their own energy use. So anyway, I'm going into storytelling, but that's my passage through time, and it goes on. But
it's absolutely incredible. You said, first of all, the hot water heaters, right? This was the solar hot water heaters that you had designed, built, and taught to install, right? Hundreds of thousands of them. Where did this come from? Because it was this more of a need? Was it a project? Because it's sort of a few parts, right? One is there's a need for a single building, but then there's also a play there, which is let's stimulate the economy by teaching people real skills of how this works. And then not only that, let's not do it just once, but let's do this at scale so we can continue to make significant impact. So where did that thought come from? What were you thinking? Was this just
I mean, the origins of it go, there's the pot over this wood stove, but over the fireplace if you're Native American. But the people who really started the science really started out in Israel, and this notion of put down pipes. It was can actually put copper pipes, and you put a piece of copper on it, and you put a piece of glass over that, and boy, it cooks that water. And then if you have a water tank up here, the hot water goes up, the cold water gets hot and goes up and keeps rotating until you have a gigantic tank of hot water. Those are still all over in the Middle East. I mean, even Iran has things like that to these days, which would serve them well, maybe more than nuclear. But I think the thing is, eventually you find out, and I met a lot of the nuclear engineers too, that eventually all these things take a lot of energy. Like, people don't realize that photovoltaic cells self-destruct, and they're extremely expensive. And when President not before oh gosh, our best African American president sent all of our PV cell companies to China because you know the production was all done there. It was invented here, but it was cheap labor, and that's what China is. It's pretty much very cheap labor.
Yeah.
But anyway, that those are just one of many things. The wind machines and all these things did work, but they're not. In the end, we've had a lot of meetings lately with a lot of the energy folks, and it's the only future really is fission and fusion. I mean, it's nuclear, which, if you think about it, is what the sun is.
Yeah.
It's right back home again. And once it's controlled and managed, which I think we're well on the way of, it's no pollution. It's not this, and there's so many ways now. I mean, Elon can take away the trash every day and throw it in the sun with a little rocket. These things were all being taught and thought about in the 70s and 80s. So it was new. But I'll tell you the other side. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, let me touch base on nuclear really quickly, because you're so right. Nuclear is such a clean energy if it's harnessed correctly and used for the right purposes. But people recognize the name nuclear, and they associate it with bombs and war and 3 Mile Island and all the Chernobyl and everything else, and they think, okay, this is actually a really terrible thing. And I believe it was down the States, but they had and you correct me if I'm wrong, you would know more than I would, but there was a big push for nuclear. And in fact, the designs for nuclear, like many smaller nuclear power plants, but there was actually a nuclear commission that was, their whole job was to push back and basically eliminate any sort of need or fall under like very, very strict compliance to build nuclear power plants. So nothing was built over, a 40-year span. And eventually it just became very, very difficult. So people started looking at alternative energy sources, like how do we, bring electricity at scale, electricity, gas, other fossil fuels to power things that are going to be safer, more efficient in the eyes of the general public. But
yeah,
I mean, now we're looking at massive farms. I mean, AI is a whole other scenario, which we were talking about offline as well. But we're talking huge data centers, right? And there was this huge push. I'm in the Vancouver area, but to turn everything electric, right? And we're talking about. I wrote my passive home tradesperson certification out of Germany. It was about 4 years ago, and we were the industry, right? We were really, really pushed with this narrative that we needed to solve this energy crisis, and something like 60% of carbon emissions were related to construction, and we were pushed for many, many years. That was where the step code was put in place here, and it was this idea in I know you're not in Canada, but here it was building these homes to step 3, step 4, step 5, then net zero, and then passive home. And the passive was the pinnacle of energy efficiency. And so I went down that road, the building science journey of really determining what it meant to be a good building, a building that was going to last, a building that was going to be, carbon neutral, or, zero carbon emission building. And then all of a sudden, we had this big push here in Vancouver to become one of the greenest cities in the planet. And build everything to be net zero by 2032. This was like going back 6 or 7 years ago. This was sort of a target. And all of a sudden we stopped hearing about that, the urgency behind that more and more as the demand for more housing seemed to be the issue that we were now facing. And we started scrapping, and when I say we, I mean the provincial government, the federal government, started scrapping some of these initiatives in favor of just getting more houses built. And suddenly that became the initiative was build more houses faster versus less homes better. And now we're sort of in this middle.
To the problem. You know, you can do it all. You can't do it all, but you can start waves. You know, and then there are waves where it's like going back to Adobe. I mean, there's I could build Adobe house all day, but they're 3 feet thick. There's no labor force for that anymore.
Yeah.
At the same time, there's new concretes and stuff that have that same power. But you're also right that um, there was a whole period there of everybody trying out different stuff and still keeping it, but not realizing that first of all the sky's not falling. I mean, get the panic off your back. If you get that off your back, then you can start saying, okay, progressively we will move towards this. These will be new codes, and slowly, and maybe even get back to all the stuff that's built and give it a boost. But that's I love Vancouver. I've been there a lot. Wade Davis is one of your most famous writers, and he's one of my best friends. We've been best friends for 30 years. We've traveled.
Amazing.
Yeah. Wade Davis and Chris Rainier of Mount grand grandson of Mount Rainier. Where he's an amazing photographer, Ansel Adams' protege. So the three of us are called the Three Amigos at Nass Geographic. We'll take trips together and Wade will talk people, I'll talk architecture, and Chris will look at the beauty you got the snapshot, people. He does people, not mountains, the way Ansel did. But the story about that was up in Vancouver. My God, I built some beautiful projects on the islands up there and way, way up north. I mean, at the very top where there's a lake and only a tribe. But back to that jumps me into the subject that I'm mostly interested in, and the environmental stuff is great food, and ecology, and technology is the other side of the pendulum. But the most important thing was cultures, and for me, I'll just dive right into that because that's what really put my architecture into play even more. Was shaping things that dig like a Jungian deep into the psyche of people. What makes them? Where's the emotions? Of course, you have religious buildings, you have other things. I mean, synagogues, mosques, churches, all these things, and you have 120 million Budans in Africa, which have another whole way of making the houses part of the spirit. And so I created this idea called Spirit of Place - Design. And for 25 years, I've taught students how to dig deep into the ancient cultures of the world everywhere. And at the same time, don't copy it. But how are they going to enter the modern world and not lose their culture base? And so, you go to Tibet or in Nepal and you see these people completely living on landscapes, and you're seeing the spirits of the Buddha and so on and so on. And we've done that part too, as well as South America, Machu Picchu. But what you see is you feel a spirit, and you feel that in the bloodline of the culture. But you don't want to copy it. That's like Xeroxing, like building another in Washington now, another bad Greek temple. First of all, the first one was pretty crappy anyway, because I know the architect James Hobon from Ireland, when his family built it, and he didn't know diddly squat. It's a long, funny story of the competition that George Washington had and got this guy in. But the whole point is they would have 50 colors if they were using true Greek temples. There's no such thing as the white column. That's kind of an English snobby color, and is gray. But the thing I got into was mostly what's happening in these cultures. How can we preserve that? And with my clients, like you're getting married, or you two people are talking like this, you're arguing all day, and I'm going, blah, blah, blah. It's going to be modern. It's going to have all the environmental stuff, but I need to do something that gets into your soul. And so finally, after I heard them clapping their hands at each other for like weeks, I said, this is going to be your house. It's going to float like this. You're going to be next to each other, but you'll never touch each other because you argue too much. They loved it. We built. We got in a historic district. We got a permit in 28 minutes. So I
Wow.
talk with that. Classicism is where you preserve it always. I mean, that's Beethoven. But when it comes to a new house on a new piece of land there, it's got to be Coltrane, jazz. And that's what won the votes. The committee, oh yeah, of course. Why would we copy the past when it's just decoration? And so I'm now shifting into the other side of me, which is the side I love the most, which is if I have nature and I have the modernity, how can I make something that really feels good? Religion, easy breezy, because there's a lot of storytelling in it. But the average person, the average community, how do you shape the building so that it actually is you, but deeper you? And that's where the mythology starts. The mythos is the spirit. I'm jumping out of subjects, but that's my most important.
I love
Uh,
it. Well, I want to talk more about that.
yeah.
Because you mentioned a number of a number of areas, right? And I have to think that if you're building a beautiful home on a beautiful piece of property and beautiful surroundings like you have in your background in your home, right? If it's going to be beautiful tree
Yeah.
landscape, or you have I had a friend of mine, he was on the podcast not too long ago, a few episodes ago, and he's built a beautiful home overlooking Red Rocks down in Colorado, and
Yeah.
it's a beautiful, like there's no doubt that bringing spirit into that home and bringing spirit all around it is a very easy thing to do, right? I live down by the beach. I don't live on the beach, but I live, a street back from it. And so I go down there every morning and I feel that, right? I look out at the sun's coming up. If you watch my Instagram stories, I mean, pretty well every day I have a sunrise, video on my Instagram stories. And that's because you go down there and you connect with a part of the world that is just much bigger than you, right? It's much more deeply rooted than
Mhm.
a human being. Um, the challenge is in metropolis areas, right? If we're looking at needing more housing and we're knocking down houses and building towers, and it's kind of all
Exactly.
mismatched, and but it's going up, it's sort of serving a purpose. It's hard to get that kind of spirit in a 700 square foot single story condo that's kind of overlooking the city, that's done at spec, that's sold at a price that may service the developers in a reasonable area, but maybe they've built it fairly inexpensive. Like, how do you bring culture to that? Because that is everything that you're talking about, the deepness, the richness, bringing in what once was, not replicating it but curating it again in the future. Seems like it's a very idyllic scenario, but how do we create?
You do. You've hit something that is my most current problem right now. I mean, in architecture, like how to get back to human scale.
Mm.
I mean, I just gave a lecture at Calgary University, and they just put a book about it. Just came in 2 days ago. But and I came up with, they said, can you do a lecture on what's wrong? I said, sprawl, mall, tall, and virtual. I mean, that is, if you look at it, and having lived in small countries in Europe and stuff, I mean, and in towns in America, there's a scale that you, where houses face each other and porches come which only happened in America, by the way, because everybody else had defense forces.
Yeah.
But and that distance is just enough so you could look at the neighbor and keep reading your paper and ignore, or you could look up and say hi. It's a very funny note, but I've learned it a long time ago. And then so sprawl, though, just kills you. You don't know anybody 5 houses down. And then sprawl mall is just a place of like hogs eating. And tall is the worst. I mean, I think to me, um, especially what they're doing in Saudi Arabia now. I mean, it's isolation, and these are the things that are dehumanizing. And then virtual, well, we all know where that's going. I mean, it's a frightening disappearance of the human togetherness. It's AI talking you better than you. And so it was an interesting 2 day seminar on the whole thing, and you're hitting it right now because I do think new urbanism is the real flavor, and it's taught a lot in universities. The problem is the developments. I mean, like you're in the Bronx or you're in Brooklyn, and you're in a scale where you know people. Five, 4 or 5 stories, perfect, just enough, just like in Europe, going down the villages, and transport. All those things are so much easier. Farmland is farmland, but this sprawl thing, once you pass the Mississippi River, you're in trouble. All the way across. You've driven across Texas and Oklahoma and all that. But that's farming, and that's okay too. That's way out there. But and you have to do this. Some people have to live that way. But in little bit towns, life really happens. It's healthier, I think. And so anyway, I take all that into play, especially back to what I call spirit of place. I mean, in one of those projects, I'm jumping into what I've taught 25 years and done 25 projects in a different country each year with 20 students from the university who heard about it. Wade Davis and I started it together with the natives way up north, and in your in that part of Canada, and what we found was that if you go deep into, well, let me tell you, here's how I take the students one semester. The first semester we're going to go to this place we've picked in Ireland, or some ancient place. I mean, really ancient, like Machu Picchu, but further in the mountains, places most people don't even know about. Tribes, the Amazon, Nepal. Wow, and I go there. I know about people. I get stuff going. Yes, we want to build a center here, a little building, something that we can be in. But we like motor scooters too. So
Yeah.
what do
We
we
need to
do?
get around.
So you got this tension, and what are the kids doing? They're all wearing American T-shirts, and they're losing their life. But you don't want to dress up ancient either. So the idea of the architecture was, how can we build a nice sacred place celebrating something about their spirits, but in a modern idiom, and with all the energy and all that stuff. That's the easy part. So what I would do is to say to students, you're going to read this book on that place for 30 days, and we're going to have a night where we meet together, and you have to have written a poem, a short, 3 or 4 line poem about that culture. Dig deep, dig deep, dig deep, psychologically, go in deeper. And that night is called Kissing Cousins Night. In other words, we're not competing for who was best. We're merging them and taking the best of each, and we make one poem. That poem, then, they have to go back to Euclid. They have to put together in a sculpture. And they all do a sculpture. And then 30 days later, we have a big evening, and the best pieces merge. They don't compete. This is how you create a culture and a psyche. And then the third is actually the project we're going to build. And you use that sculpture and you use that one poem and you make it, and then we combine that at the end, and voila, every time it's been something amazing, because it's about nature, it's about the spirit of this culture we're going to be with. And then we get in a plane and we arrive there, and we build the entire project in 9 days with the local people.
Wow.
And every time it's finished, 5 won AIA Academy Awards for the students. It was plastered all over the New York Times. It has The Spirit of Place, it's called. .com. It's a website,
We'll, yeah, we'll
spiritofplace-design.com.
put that in the show notes for sure.
Yeah, you'll really see these projects that students have never picked up a rock, and they've learned to, and local people are working with us. It's a team thing, and I'm Dr. I mean, 6 o'clock, by the way, you wake up. We have two choices for breakfast: eat it or don't. Put on your boots. We're marching up, and and after about 2 days of whining, they can't stop. And after the third or fourth day, they're exhausted with the local people. But the last 3 days, they're in ecstasy. They have found and built something that is permanent forever, and learned how, I hope in the future, architecture is taught in a way where you study nature, you study technology, but you really study the deeper psyche, the spirit of the place, the spirit of the people, and what does it present? And can you do that? Because that's what's so beautiful about Nantucket or Heidelberg or little towns, is there's a story there. You feel the culture, you feel something that's human.
How do
Anyway,
you
talk too much, but that's something I really wanted to get across because it's my favorite.
You don't talk too much. If anybody tells you that, you send them my way. I'll tackle them.
Take them down. Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
with this in mind, I mean, one of the challenges that we are facing, right, and I had alluded to this earlier, was this idea of more housing. And so around here, right, the official community plans in a lot of our local cities across the country have been rezoned to build multiplex units. This is like take down a single family house, put up a duplex, a fourplex, a sixplex on a single lot. These are small units, but we have more density, right? Some would refer to it as the missing middle, right? It's anything between a single family property and a 6-story building. But the biggest challenge there that people have is NIMBYism, right? It's like they like the idea, they understand that there's got to be some density going. Oh yeah, no worries.
Well, there's action going on in the next room, so I had to shut down the door.
Sounds like a little robotic vacuum or something cruising around.
Yeah. We're married now, but no, I'm kidding.
But the challenge being is there's very few designs that people agree on because there's no culture, right? It's most people think, all right, we're putting up these buildings, they're in our backyard, they look terrible. There, several different designs all over the place. Nobody can agree that it's really doing any good. They believe it solves a problem, but they get stuck up on the design because there really isn't any sort of soul there, right? There isn't really any sort of culture. Nobody can see past anything or get deep enough to see and feel that this is going to be a good project to the depth that you're expressing that architecture really should play. They see this as a big structure that's going up quickly, that's going to affect their way of life, that's changing the past, changing the culture of what they knew, and they really can't get past that. And so you get a very frustrated. We're in a suburban area out here, and we're seeing a lot of those homes being torn down to make use of the property to add density, but
Yes.
it's done it in sort of a soulless way. And I think a lot of builders, they're trying to get on the right side of it. Developers are trying to get on the right side of it, but nobody's really been able to nail it, and nobody's really been able to do a great job of it.
You see that in every city, Atlanta, even DC now. I mean, there's this kind of, build up the little box, throw a little this in, a little thing like that, and this and that. I mean, you don't need an architect for these things. I mean, the developer builder has already got the plans. I mean, it is no longer what I would call architecture. It's just boxing and housing, and I don't know. There's a very difficult problem to do because it sort of says, well, beauty is not and I mean beauty in a way of feeling good. It's not in there anymore. And so that's why I'm sort of pushing, if you're going to do multi-housing, you got to go back still to something like the Spirit of Place, or something that has a story in it that's about the people there. Now, America is difficult because we are lots of different kinds of people.
Lots of different kinds of people.
And so that's even more interesting in some way. I mean, you have the sweater store where they have 50 shade, the same sweater on 50 shades of beige, from black to white, Asian kids, but they're all the same in the same sweater. And it should be the reverse, where each of their sweaters has something to do with the cultivation and their spirit. But that's gone. Yeah. And you're on the. I think this is going to be one of the best and most interesting big problems, is new urbanism. And it's been around for 30 years. There's a lot of architectural courses and people that have built some things like that. You see some in New Mexico, there's some in Florida, even though they were colonial copies, as if you were sitting on some southern porch, with your pipe. But at least they tried. It's not the same old box with the same old door. And but think of London too. I mean, there's a lot of houses, but they have just enough charm and culture. You don't mind them bounce together. And also people walk.
It's interesting. Yeah, sorry, I don't mean to cut you off there. Go ahead.
Yeah, the most famous thing I ever was like the distance from the house on the porch, which is here, and the street should be just enough that you can be reading your book and friends are going by, and it's just far enough that if you don't look up, they're not bothered, or you can look up and say, hey, what's going on? It's a very funny geometric distance where it's okay, or it's just a wave or whatever, and that gives you family and community, but also privacy. Yeah.
We were in South Africa. My wife is originally from South Africa. That's where she was born. And we were down there early 2020, actually just as COVID hit. We flew out February 28th and we were mandated to come back March 14th. Like literally we left to go to South Africa. I'd never heard of COVID. And we halfway through our trip, there was like alerts coming through on our phone saying, hey, there's this big thing happening. You should probably get home. Anyways, my point being is like there were some beautiful homes there. And I have any number of photos on my phone and camera of homes, like these beautiful, quaint little homes. Some have like thatched roofs, but very interesting architecture. These houses have been here for a long time. They look beautiful, right? They're very quaint little homes. The challenge is like if you take that house out of the environment that it's in right now and place it in a suburban neighborhood like the one that I'm in, all of a sudden that isn't a quaint little house anymore. That thing's a teardown. And it doesn't make sense to live there because you're really taking that out of the environment. So at one point, because it has beautiful surroundings and it has that deeper spirit, that culture built into that house, that's something I don't know that can really be replicated. And I don't know if that's a template thing. Don't template that. Don't carbon copy it and up and move it but you have to put a spin on it. But I just thought it was interesting that if I was living in South Africa, this would be a beautiful little house to live in, a wonderful little vacation home that I would be very, very proud of. But that same home, if I was to lift that up and put it on the property that I'm on right now, it would lose all essence, and people would drive by it and look at it as if it was just a complete teardown. And whoever lives in that, it's a little witch down the road that lives in the hut on that street there. Why is that?
That's a tough one, actually, because it's so mushed, and you know what I mean. There's nothing stark. There's nothing flaming about it. It's not like what I built at my house is a lot of traditional houses, but I'm hanging off steel cables over a cliff, literally, and nothing touches the ground. So when people go by, they say, "What the?" I said, "Yeah, I did this 25 years ago." It's not new. And for them, it's like 20, 50 years from now. Authenticity, I really love eclecticism and authenticity. I mean, if you're going to have a village like that and there's different houses, at least you're starting to feel like there's different people here. I mean, everybody has different opinions, different this and that. And, um, but, but it's not so much the period or the style, it's just how well it's built. I mean, how well is it? How is the yard? I mean, how's the landscape? What does the house tell you? So I don't know. It's a very good question, because especially in America, because we transported so many different people from so many countries. Um, and I know driving in from the airport in Vancouver, I mean, the amount of Chinese front yards and stuff blew my mind. Every time I went back out there was because we did a number of spirited places there. Um, it was, so different. And yet I saw a photo once of a samurai family from Japan, old picture, and some of the local tribes up the coast, and you couldn't tell the difference, except one had a samurai sword. Otherwise, you would never know it wasn't the same. So, I say, well, this is the new flood coming back, to Vancouver. I don't know. Do we want eclecticism, or do we want to have all New England villages that are somewhat the same, or the Nantucket mindset, where you get three colors, gray or old gray, new gray, and white for trim, and you can't do anything else? It's very soothing, but it's not real anymore. And I don't know. You're asking a tough question.
I know. I know.
Yeah.
It is a tough question. It's something that we're looking to solve, because the general community, right? They have this idea in their mind, and I think one of the things that you had alluded to was America, Canada. Like, we are a very diverse countries, right? With many different backgrounds. That's essentially what we are, is just a melting pot of different countries and different bloodlines. And which is a beautiful thing. But when you go to City Hall for a new townhome complex that's being brought into place, there's a very few people that are having a say in what that looks like. And there's not a lot of culture there. It's like, does it does it sit within the bylaws? Does it meet the setback requirements? Does it meet the height requirements? Does it meet relative density? And then, okay, here's, this is approved. This looks fine. But then these units go up, and it's just, they really do feel spiritless.
Yeah, because we live in an Andy Warhol world. I mean, the Campbell soup can became the culture of us. The cartoon, and so we're in an industrial, massive revolution of good things. I mean, health and travel, and I mean, look at where we are from 200 years ago. And at the same time, the homogenization, though, is what comes out of that. It's just pure old. You can't say, I'm going to tax everybody so that the government can make it more interesting, and you can't say to the developer who's competing with 20 other developers, hey, can you do a better job than just those flat boards? And I don't think those things are going to change much. The only thing that turns people on, or turns them in that direction, I think, is when someone comes along and does a really nice job of some architecture. And that's where the architect, not the builder, not the developer, should reign in the project. But those institutional big developers don't. I mean, you don't talk back to them. They think they know what they're doing, and in the end, sadly, the worst part is it still sells.
Yeah. Well, that's
because there's nothing else to buy.
There's nothing else to buy, right? It just comes down to supply and demand. But what we're seeing here is a lot of developers are very much they're underwater right now, right? They are struggling. There's been a big shift And some of the major developers, I had a small roundtable meeting with some very big developers here in the area that are developing the Vancouver area, and they're not building. One of the biggest developers, I won't name names, but they put 56 projects on hold, 56 projects that they were planning on kicking off on hold this year. Another one, they've laid off massive amounts of their staff, and they're pushing 5 projects through just to keep the wheels turning, right? Just to keep the machine moving. And there's a lot of inventory that's sitting vacant, and nobody's
Why?
buying these. Well, it's sort of a complex situation, but there's one. Well, here in Vancouver, there's actually, which I didn't think it was going to play as big of an effect, but there was a case here in Canada where a huge amount of property was it went to court because the First Nations had decided, hey, this is actually our property. We want to reclaim this land. And there's actually a massive amount of property in like all of Richmond, Vancouver, West Vancouver, where that property is potentially under the same scrutiny, right? There's a map that kind of draws where this land could potentially be, you know, in a lawsuit down the road. So if you're looking at raising $170 million from an investor down in the UA somewhere, and they're thinking, all right, well, in 5 years we don't even know if you're going to own this property, and then they're going to tell their friends that maybe it's a bad idea to invest in this area because it's kind of crazy what's going on down in Canada. I mean, that's one part. Two, there's a lot of inventory. People just aren't buying right now, right? There's sort of this shift where there was a lot that came on in the market over the last few years. There's been a huge amount of building going on, lot being pre-sold, and now people are sitting in their homes. The value of their homes has gone down. They don't have as much equity in their home as they thought that they did. And that was due highly to a COVID stimulation, right? So after COVID, there was a lot of money that was being thrown at people. People moved out to the suburbs. They bought bigger homes, and there was a mad rush, mad panic. And so now all of a sudden that value of that property goes higher and higher and higher. So now people have a lot of equity on paper, and so they use that cash to go and get a home equity line of credit to renovate, or to buy a new car, or to buy some new furniture, or whatever that is. But then the value of their home starts dropping when things start moving, and now all of a sudden they start to sit a little tighter on their cash and start looking at their monthly expenses. And now the homes, the land that these developers have purchased, the value of that land has actually decreased. People aren't buying as many units, and banks are now looking at these developments as more of a risk. So they want you, in order to develop, they want you to pre-sell generally a certain percentage of these units before they will kick in any sort of additional financing. So you have private lenders that are thinking, all right, it's a bit too risky of a market for us to invest financially. You have your traditional lenders like your banks or your credit unions, or CMHC or whatever, is going to look at this property and say, this property you acquired was worth this much money at one point. Now we're valuing it at this much, so we actually need you to pre-sell more units. And developers are saying, we can't pre-sell these units because nobody's going to pay us what we need for them to actually make the construction viable. So we're just not going to build it at all. We're just going to hold it here.
Are these single family units, or how?
No, I'm talking multifamily units. Yeah, for sure. So this is in the multifamily world. This isn't the single family world.
Yeah. I just want to make sure that's what I was hearing.
But we are
That's
also
strange that's happening, because here it's sort of the opposite. The past 5 years, I mean, and $300 a square foot was built here. It's now 500 to 600. There's no coming back. 600, and they're trying to lower it with the new politics, but the last political system just, I mean, the money was just flowing like crazy, and for building things like that. So it's a reverse now where you can't afford to build.
We're seeing that a lot here too, right? And this is with introduction. I mean, price per square foot for building is continuing to go up significantly. It's sort
Yeah.
of stabilized a little bit right now just due to demand. But with additional charges, we have massive DCC fees or development cost charges that developers have to pay when you're developing, a single unit. So if you are building a multiplex and you're building 6 units, and if your DCC fees are $50,000 per unit, then all of a sudden you're spending another $300,000 that really just goes to the government in taxes and fees. So you have to build that into your pro forma and your build costs. So now and then the market has to pay for that, right? And then it's a massive cost in permitting, and now everything doesn't it doesn't need just an architect or a designer. It's everything requires engineering, even if you're building and sticking to your span tables and building a.
That's 5 times thicker.
It's and it's insane. And so
Because we don't need all that, but my God, it triples, quadruples the work time for the architects, for the builders. I
for
mean,
sure.
it's
For sure
insane.
it does. And cities don't want to take liability. So they require several engineers on this is a single family home to look at everything, soil, structure, envelope, right? You name it. And so it makes the building timelines that much more complex, and it makes the cost that much more complex. And then when you decide that you have to meet certain requirements, whether it's going to be closer to net zero requirements, and we're putting in spending more time detailing out the envelopes, better HRV systems, etc. The cost does go up, and the question is how do we continue to bring costs down while staying relatively efficient with the design, and it really comes down though to expectations of the shape and the design of the home that people are after. So if we are going to be building really energy efficient homes, and these are the things that are going to mandate, right? As soon as we get outside of 4 or 5 outside corners, those costs start going up. If and you see in Germany a lot, right? It's and all over Europe, you see pretty standard box homes, thick walls, deep window wells, you name it, but they don't have 7 intersecting roof lines and architectural decks and patios and this and that, which really adds to the complexity of thermal detailing and just energy efficient systems.
Built for step out on the porch. It's instead of being the shoe box all day and night.
Yeah,
Change.
exactly. And people want these things, but the cost continues to rise. So that mixed with a various amount of other things, costs of lumber and hard goods is continually an issue. But that's really sort of the crux of it in the single family world, right? Is shifting the expectations of what sort of a design is going to work in that neighborhood that you're going to be happy with, be proud of. And quite often it's more than four or 5 outside corners. It becomes fairly complex because people want all the the angles and the this and the that. So cost goes up, and it's not something that I think we're going to solve right now. But same thing, like back to that little point where you have this little quaint house in South Africa that I was talking about. You plunk it on this property, all of a sudden that becomes a teardown. You could build that house for $180 a square foot, whereas a custom home here is going to be $500 to $1,000 a square foot typically. So that becomes a challenge.
Yeah, and that sort of wraps back in my mind. You don't want to have high rises because they end up costing a load too. And there's just got to be some kind of interim, even if it's 6 feet apart houses, a little like quarter acre.
Mm.
I live on a quarter acre. And it's tons of room.
Yeah.
I mean, and backyard and all that sort of thing. I have a stream running through, but the thing is, um, that's the kind of studies that they did in California a lot. Is what is the most energy saving best project? It's not a high rise. It's not a townhouse. It's a single family, about quarter acre, because people in those kind of areas where there's how do you say um, grocery stores, that sort of thing. Well, like Washington D.C. is like that. It's truly a nice sort of single house village with some multis, but where they're starting to go into the big high rises, you don't. It's. I mean, when you're in Manhattan, you're there to work. I mean, you barely know anybody, and you do know if you're off on the edge and you grew up, but it's a shoulder bumping place,
Yeah.
and it's not healthy in that respect. It's funny, but
Is architecture in the future alive and well in the way that you believe that it should be?
mm, um, no, in a certain way, because I see more and more high rising going. I see more and more copies of Colony Baloney, I call it, and there's no spirit in it.
Mm.
There's no charm. There's no feeling. So I think this, and the sprawl, of course, is the worst. I mean, look at it from a plane, drive out to it. I mean, and of course, no wonder AI and television and iPhones will be the what to go home to, not your yard, not your street where you say, "Hey, hold on, what's going on?" Like in Italy, I want to hear a few people arguing sometimes. you know, I mean, a cafe. Every time I go back into different things in Europe, I never want to leave again, because that it has built itself around that. Although downtowns have their big towers,
Mm.
okay, I mean a little bit of that, but to how do I say it? I don't know that the only architecture that I'm interested in, frankly, is obviously the aesthetic world. That I want to do something that's not just, I don't mean just pretty and beautiful, but I mean that really stirs up the spirit, that stirs up what you're talking about. And the only way I know how to do that is to create authenticity, let people will copy. You're never going to get, I mean, maybe 2.5% of architects are creative architects. That, I mean, that's the other side of it too. There's that grouping that really does invent new stuff. I mean, Franklin Wright's a classic example, but all of, I mean, Barcelona, my God, I mean, Gaudi is a god to me. I mean, I saw that when I was 16 on a motorcycle. I was driving down to from Heidelberg down to Africa on a month trip just for traveling. And wow, my jaw dropped. I didn't know about him at that point, and I was going to be there 2 days. I couldn't leave for 2 weeks. That was way back, and now it's near completion. But the ideas like that, even if there's a bunch of stuff around it that's normal, the same, Colonia or sterilized sort of Moscow stuff, occasionally something like that has to give you a feeling, just like if you lived out of town and you want those big trees in your yard because they like you said, you walk down to the water, it rejuvenates your spirit.
Mm.
And I think that's going to be that's always been a tough problem, especially in the modern world. And I think right now with architecture, what I'm seeing is the schools are pretty good. They are teaching people how to create, but there's a lot of just learning how to copycat too, and that's where architecture is right now. It's in awards, and then you start invading with all the feminist stuff and all these things, which I'm totally for. But what happens is the awards are no longer for 4 years. There's no male awards. I mean, you're going too far, girls. I mean, get over it. I have a lot of good friends in that, but I mean, come on. Uh, that last award was a piece of shit, and you know it. So, but I think these things are waves that needed to happen, and now they need to blend out again into something that's more balanced. But
This episode is sponsored by New Vision Projects, and everybody has heard the horror stories that happen. They have a friend of a friend or a neighbor that's been renovating for years on end, or they've been building a home and it just hasn't gone the way that it needed to go. Budgets are blown through the roof, timelines, forget about them. New Vision Projects has an incredibly strong track record for over 15 years of working with customers, serving them at the highest level. If you are considering building or renovating, check them out on Instagram at New Vision Projects or at newvisionprojects.com. Building the homes you want with the confidence you need. New Vision has you covered. Let them show you why they're different. Back to the show.
Those are things that do affect architecture. I mean, who's the great new modern architect right now? Where's the where's Gaudi, and where's
Well, the reason I ask is because I talk to young students, and I talk to a lot of high schools, and a number of them that want to get into architecture, and they talk, right? They're inspired. If they came on and they listened to Travis talk about architecture, they would probably be inspired to follow their hearts and pursue this dream, and like they love the spirit, they love connecting, they want to build like really neat buildings and do that. And then they get into architecture school, and it's very, very different than they believe it's going to be. They're like, where's the creativity? When do I get to do this part? This is all very, very difficult stuff. Maybe it's not for me. And they end up getting a job with an architecture firm, and they sort of just become a number, and then they start catting out, just really standard, detail cut sheets of whatever. And they kind of like become this, I'm an architect, but, and I'll ask them, I'm like, well, do you really enjoy it? And they said, you know what? I thought I would, but I'm not.
Well, hey, that's been around forever, though. I got to tell you. I mean, I would say in the first school of architecture, I was for a couple semesters at Georgia Tech, and I could see immediately the 3 or 4 people who were creative, and the rest were just, it was going to be their job. And that's the homogenization of the modern world. It's health. I mean, we're better off than two centuries ago in terms of health and life, but all I fight for, though, is like teaching these spirit of place things, getting students trained, getting their minds to focus on doing something that blows your mind and help other people. It's hard, though. I mean, you have to jump, as the Buddha said, jump and the net will appear. It's not an easy jump,
Yeah. Travis, I have a couple more questions for you.
Sure,
you have a couple more minutes here.
Yeah, I'm fine.
Awesome. For somebody that wants to get into architecture, what's the advice that you're going to give them? Because not everybody's going to have the same kind of opportunity and the same sort of a amount of travel that you've done that's going to inspire them. But something that really is, I mean, you were saying there's a very small percentage of people that what you would consider like the creative architects, and the rest kind of fall into a job versus becoming an inspiration of their own. What would you tell somebody that's looking ahead and looking at building a career in architecture over the next 30 years?
I'd say make sure that you learn the practical side. You have to have your little courses in engineering and these things, but make sure that you find out ahead of time that there are a lot of creative professors who profess because they couldn't go out and fight the real battle, which is how do you get a client that's going to let you do something absolutely wickedly wild and great? It's not easy. I learned how to speak and got into drama and theater and all these things just because I enjoyed it, and I'm a big martial arts guy. 5 black belts.
Me too. Oh, no way. Are you? I didn't know that.
Aikido, through Don, and we have a great dojo here. And
Awesome.
I
This
did.
book right behind me you don't see is the Tao of Jeet Kune Do, Bruce Lee's
Oh
book.
wow,
Yeah, I was a
cool,
big,
very cool.
big Bruce Lee guy. Yeah.
But I learned in all of that, frankly, and in some of the um, stuff in the '60s and '70s, not the hippie stuff. That's kind of easy. But I mean, looking at different cultures was really amazing to me. And you just, I don't think it's even that. I think you just have to want to create, and you have to push it hard. And you're gonna, it's gonna be hard to break through. And it's if you get the super thing, to Ando or something, there are a few people that make it up there, but there are a lot of people just under it too, and you just have to jump and take the risk.
Right.
Always take the risk. Otherwise, I don't think you'll get dragged into the other stuff, and that's. I mean, think about it. That's the same for musicians. It's the same for artists. It's part of the art world, but don't think of it as an engineer would. Think of it as an architect who is wanting to fly. What was it? One of my engineers once told me a funny story. He says, "Well, he said, if an architect builds a building without an engineer, it's going to fall down.
Yeah.
But if an engineer builds a house without an architect, an outraged public's going to come tear it down."
Yeah, it's so true.
Mark Twain view of you, just risk it, go for it, try and get into anything you can, and then just do it. It's all I know to say, because I could have get bumped back a lot. It wasn't like they just fell in my lap. I just kept pushing hard, and you got to really love it.
Yeah. You got to really love it, man. That's one of our core values here is love it, right? You need to, if you're going to be doing the thing, you need to have the passion for it, because there's going to be a lot of days where you're going to wake up and you're not going to enjoy the things that you have to do. But if you love that bigger picture and you have a real compelling reason as to why you're doing it, I mean, that is what is going to get you through those difficult times or those mundane weeks where you're sitting behind and you're drafting, or you're, in our case, we're building sort of the same thing, or dealing with, subcontractors and, a number of different headaches that come up. And you really truly do need to have a passion for what it is that you do. If you are
absolutely, and you have to decide that's my life and that's the way it's going to be, and just do it. If you fail, don't worry, you tried, and if you try really hard, you won't fail.
Yeah.
And you just got to keep doing it. And I think it's like I said, all artists, all musicians, I mean, that's the route you take, and you get as best as you can, and be proud of what you did, and try again, push again. It's amazing, some ideas you have and it goes away, and then 5 years later, it's still in your head, and a client comes along where it works for them, and just don't lose that.
Yeah, love that, Travis. I got a question here for you. It may, the viewers may not understand where this question's coming from, but it's something that we were discussing offline before we started recording, and it's been in the back of my mind since we've been having our conversation. What is a point?
The definition, according to Euclid, a point in Greek, point is that which has no part. Put that simple sentence down. That was 2 weeks we debated with 12 people and 2 professors. What the hell does that sentence mean? And what you learn is that it doesn't exist, but it does. And you have to start getting into that mode where it's invisible, because no matter what the point is, it gets smaller or it gets bigger. And so what I teach my students is that's just the beginning of the making of humans, of life, of everything, because I get 2 points, a line. I get 3 points, a triangle. I get a third point in the air, I have a pyramid. So I'm in the third dimension then. And if I can spin it in my head without moving it, I'm in the fourth dimension. And if I can go inside and outside the pyramid and move around at the same time, bingo, you hit the fifth dimension. And that's the biggest unknown. And that's the ring bell for being an architect. You use geometry more than any other thing. And I use that a lot in people and the students. And I get it. It's like you start, you know how it is? You're working on something and the flash comes, boom. You see it already. It's just now spending time to draw it and massage it. And I only add this too. The one biggest fear I see coming now with AI is slowly but surely I'm shrinking my staff and the machines are taking over. I mean, working drawings now can be done in 4 days without, no matter what it is. Mm. So what's going to happen to the students that aren't in the fifth dimension? The fifth dimensions, the robots will never catch up with us. We are the gods of the robot. But on the other hand, it may be that the workers part is more and more computerized, and so architecture may get smaller, but it won't ever lose its fifth dimension. Yeah. If you want to be creative, and I say that to most artists. I don't know if that helps, but that's what I try and show people.
There's a few things that AI is never going to take from human beings: vision, taste, and care. Mm-hmm. And if you can spend some time in those areas more often than not, you're going to be all right. But AI will definitely be a faithful and loyal slave and won't ask for extended benefits and take holidays off with its family and get sick and all.
I wish they start changing stuff on my iPhone every 4 hours. Yeah. I'm losing track of the number of buttons that are available, which I don't give a shit about.
Yeah. Pretty soon it's just going to be one and you're just going to ask it to do the thing. And it's not going to be a ton of different apps. It's literally just going to be, we're just talking to our machine and that's it. Like there won't be apps for anything. Travis, this has been it's been an experience. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It was great talking to you, too. It's so fun to talk philosophy with other fellow.
I love it. I love it. Where can people find you if they want to connect with you?
Travis' website is travispricearchitects.com. All one plural. I have, and that's where our stuff is. And then spiritofplace-design.com is all the student stuff I did 25, but that's a fascinating. I wrote all these books behind me are the ones I wrote, and then there's a million upstairs of other stuff. But this is I'm hanging out over space right now, looking down at the river. But I think that's the best place. TravisPriceArchitects.com, or my email is Travis at. It's always first names Travis at TravisPriceArchitects.com.
Awesome.
Yeah. But please do. I love talking to people and learning from them as much as dancing with ideas.
Well, I've learned a lot from you here today. Thank you so much for being here. And to all our listeners,
Vancouver, I might be heading out there this summer to go up north. Wade and I want to go up north to the first Spirit of Place project we built on a tribal property. And we decided getting just the point where it might be time to go up and visit again. So I'll let you know.
Let me know if you're coming to Vancouver. It would be my honor to come and meet with you in person.
Yeah. Love that city. It was a beautiful area. I loved it. I almost moved there. I was very close to it.
Well, we are very blessed. I mean, despite all the, everything else that I was talking about and housing and everything else, like it really is a beautiful part of the world. I mean, I'm looking out now and I see the North Shore Mountains where I'm looking at, and we're blessed to be by the ocean, and it's an awesome place to be.
And it never rains, really.
Well, if it does, people go crazy on the roads for sure. Yeah. Travis, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for being here. And to all our listeners that are out there and still with us, until next time, as always, I'm here rooting for you to win. We'll chat soon. Have a great day. Stay blessed. Rock and roll.
Adios.
Adios.